All right, let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you. Father, we praise you that we can come together on your appointed day. And Father, especially in the midst of so many youth, Father, they're the apple of your eye, and Father, they're our future. They're the next generation of your assembly. And so I just want to lift them up today. And Father, I ask that you bless them with your Holy Spirit. Bless them, Father, with the courage and the strength to rise up in this last generation and fulfill your purpose. And as we go through the Torah portion or the Torah study today, Father, I just pray that you would enlighten us, help us, Father, to grasp, the full meaning of what it means to honor our father and our mother, and to be able to apply it, and especially for the youth to be able to apply it too. And so we thank you and praise you for all these things. In Yeshua's name, amen. Okay, so we're continuing our series on Torah Basics. This is part 9. And last week we finished the commandment on the Sabbath. There is one scripture text I failed to bring in last week, just for another an example or a witness to should we cook or not on Shabbat. There is a command that during the high day feasts you are allowed to cook, and therefore giving credence to on the weekly Shabbat we should not. So I just thought I'd add that. I didn't have it in my notes last week, but I just wanted you to have that as another witness. Okay, so this week it's commandment number 5, and what is that commandment, Greg? What's commandment number 5? Obey your parents. I'll give you that. All right. It's to honor your father and your mother. And, I need a clicker. So, in Exodus chapter 20, verse 12, and Deuteronomy 5:16, it mentions this commandment number 5. It says to honor, and that is the Hebrew word kabod. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. To honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which Yahweh thy God giveth thee. In Deuteronomy 5:16, it says, honor thy father and thy mother as Yahweh thy God hath commanded thee, that thy days may be prolonged, and that it may go well with you in the land which Yahweh thy God giveth thee. So this is actually the first commandment with promise. Not only is it a command, but there's a promise that goes along with this command, and it's unique, and we're gonna hit on that later on. So, for some of you, it may not have been your biological father or mother that raised you. It may have been grandparents, foster parents, a step parent, adoptive parents. It may have been an aunt or an uncle, a brother or sister. But whatever the case, the principle of honoring applies to whoever may have taken the responsibility to raise and care for you, okay? So I'm going to focus on 2 aspects today of this topic. And they are, number 1, the meaning of honor from a Hebraic context and the Somatic connections. When I was preparing to put this together, I had some ideas of, what honor means. And when I got into the meaning of this word and how it was used, it brought to me a much different picture, concrete meaning of what the word honor means. So I learned a lot as I was putting this study together. And we're also going to look at, there's a lot of thematic connections that came out also. And the second aspect is the thematic connection of the promise that's in this command, and how it connects to walking in all his commandments, statutes, and judgments, okay? So, in other words, honoring your mother and your father is only one small part of the blessing of long life, okay? That's only one small aspect of it, and that's what we're going to see as we go through this. So what is the meaning of honor? So what does it mean to honor your mother and your father, biblically? Comments? To be a good person? To live righteously. Treat them with respect. Treat them with respect. Anything else? Okay. How would you describe it and what does it look like? You kind of did that. So, well, one of the verses that we would usually throw into a study like this is Colossians chapter 3, verses 20. It says, "Children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing unto the Lord." Pretty basic, right? Okay. But again, that's only a small part. What I want to, by the end of the study, what we're going to find out, this meaning of honor has much more gravity than I think we've ever given it. Now, back in the ancient Near East culture, it was pretty common. They understood the concept of honor, and we're going to see that. And I think in our day and age, we've lost that. And I would ask, how are we doing in our Western culture today in regards to your concept of honoring our parents? So how are we doing? If we were to be graded on a scale of 1 to 10, how are we doing, in this concept of honoring our parents in today's culture? Not good. Not good. I have another a study I did years ago to encourage the youth, and it gives a lot of statistics, of where we're at today. And there were some men of wisdom that saw this coming 100 years ago, and they began to write books about the fall of specifically young men in the roles and responsibilities that they should be carrying on. And it fell in the hands of the teaching of the parents. They saw this coming, and they wrote books about it. But I'm not going to get into that. So, how are we doing in today's culture? Well, the Bible kind of gives us a prophecy of how we would be doing in this day and age. He says, "This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves," that seems to be what's going on today, "covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God." Does that kind of sum up where this world is today? Our culture has lost all sense of dignity and character when it comes to honor and shame. I was trying to think, I was doing some research, and I was trying to pull up what were some of the social norms in the Western culture in the 1950s. Of course, I couldn't come up with, what I was looking for specifically, but it just brought in some of the changes, and the big one was music, rock and roll in the 50s. And that began one of the downward spirals of this concept of honoring, parents and authority. Oops, I got ahead of myself. My wife didn't know that picture is in there. And so we have definitely spiraled down very quickly. And I'd like to submit to you that in today's culture, this concept of honor has become obsolete. Its meaning abstract. Why? Because I think mankind has abandoned this idea of fear, of shame that's attached to doing something wrong. We've abandoned, I'll say it again, we've abandoned the fear of shame of when we do something we know it's wrong. When there's no shame, then there's no limit to the debauchery that mankind will go, okay? And so I was hoping to get kind of a trend of what happened from the 50s and the 60s and stuff. And I can remember, and I'm gonna be real with you, like Nathan Harmon would say, "Can I be real with you?" I'm going to give you an example in my own life. When I was growing up as a young teenager, my parents and grandparents were, they grew up in a culture where, intimacy was for marriage, right? And that's the culture, that's the way it should be today. But back then, it was much more prominent. And I'd say going 50 years back, it was much more prominent, okay? My brother ended up getting the cart before the horse, if I can say it that way. And I can remember my grandpa telling me that he can never forgive my brother for doing what he did, But that was a culture. That was a social norm. You didn't do those things. It was shameful to get the cart before the horse when it comes to intimacy in marriage. You understand what I'm saying? You know, youth. I didn't pick this topic, for you. It just ended up that they wanted to. You guys wanted to have a youth event on this day, and it just so happened that Honor Your Parents happened to fall on this because Marcel didn't want to teach today. So this wasn't my idea. Okay, so. But I think God has a plan and purpose in this. All right. So this is my example. And and that was a norm that I was taught and I believed in. But when you're around a culture in a group of people that no one shares that, it's very difficult to stand strong. Would you agree? Okay. Because the peer pressure is really strong. And it brings me back to this idea that when Israel was going into the land, Yahweh told them that you're going to be a nation, a peculiar people, and you're going to be different than all the nations. And that idea of being a one people with one law, one Torah, and one God, that social norm would help people to continue walking in His ways. And understanding that with honor, the contrast of that is shame. And you didn't want to shame, become a person of shame, because when you're a person of shame, it doesn't just affect you, but it affects your mother and your father and those around you, your whole family. Do you see that? It doesn't just affect the individual, okay? It affects a whole group of people. And so having that one body, that one family, it helped people stay, on that path. And I think that's how God originally intended it. But because of our sin, we got dispersed throughout all the nations, and we're here to deal with, many cultures around us. So it's very difficult. So my life story, can I be real with you? Okay. So this is my wedding day, July 18th, 1981. It was a pretty special day, and but there was one small stain in this, and it was I didn't listen to my mom and dad, and I followed the culture that was around me. And along with my wedding day, that's my son, my firstborn. So I got the cart before the horse. Now you may say, well, Mike, it turned out well for you. That was 40 years ago. It turned out well. But it brought shame to my mom. It brought shame to my dad. I can remember telling my mom, and she just broke down and cried. And so, well, you're going to have to marry us. It's absolutely. I intend to. But I bring this up because, again, when we're in a culture when there is no shame, the degree of debauchery just continues, and that's where we're at today. When the riots were going on, during the pandemic, I wonder how many mothers watched their children on those videos of destroying places. Do you think that brought shame to some of them? I don't think it brought shame to all of them, but I think it brought shame to many of them. So we can see when there is no shame in our actions, then there is no limit to the debauchery we'll fall into. And so this concept of honor and shame, Enrico brings it out, pretty clear in his teachings on honor and shame, because in the ancient Near East, shame was a huge thing, and it prevented you from going outside the social norms, okay? All right, so I want to touch on, this idea, this concept of honor has a really, you might say, there's a gravity behind it. So we're going to get into that. So, in Paul's letter to Timothy, he exhorts the youth to be role models. That's what that's what I intended to be, when I was young. But again, the culture will pull you in, and then you begin to go down roads that you never intended to do. I don't care how good your intentions are, it can happen. So he says, these things command and teach. Let no man despise your youth, but be thou an example of the believers in word and conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, and in purity, until I come and give attendance to the reading, to exhortation, and to doctrine. Neglect not the gift that is in you, which was given thee by prophecy, with the laying on of hands of the presbytery. But meditate upon these things, give thyself wholly unto them, that thou profiting may appear to all. And take heed unto thyself and unto the doctrine, continue in them, for in doing this thou shalt both save yourself and them that hear thee. So Paul's very clear and specific exhortation for the youth to be an example of the believers. Because we need you standing up, because in this culture, if there's nobody out there to help lead them to the right path, then the path they're going to pick is the one of the culture. And Paul's saying here, you need to stand in the gap and to pull them, into the way of life. So, the meaning of honor from a Hebraic context and its thematic connections. So I'm going to walk you through the process of learning this concept of honor through a Hebrew lens. We talk about that a lot here, but you'll begin to see the treasures and the depth and what God has been trying to teach mankind from the beginning when we look at things from their mindset. Okay? All right. So, in Exodus 20:12, we read these earlier. Honor, and this Hebrew word is kabod, your father and your mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which Yahweh giveth thee. And in Deuteronomy 5:16, honor or kabod. Am I pronouncing that right? Where's Mary? How do you pronounce it? Kabod? Kabod. Okay. But honor thy father and mother as Yahweh thy God hath commanded thee, that thy days may be prolonged, and that it may go well with you in the land which Yahweh thy God giveth you. So what does this word kabod mean? So, I talk about words like abstract and concrete. Abstract is something that is really kind of hard to explain. It's just out. You ever seen abstract paintings and you wonder, what is that? But Hebrew is very concrete because it uses pictures in their letters and the words, in the original letters and the words of Hebrew, to give us a visual concept of what he's trying to teach us. So this word kabod is a primitive root that is it could be in a bad sense or in a good sense, burdensome, severe, dull, or in a good sense, numerous, rich, and honorable, but causatively to make weighty. So I got this picture of two men with a lot of weight. They're carrying, their luggage or whatever, but they're on a mission. There's something, they're on a mission for. So this idea of honor has to do with to make weighty, to carry something, that's heavy, all right? So just keep that in mind as we go through this, all right? So the first use of the word kabod, and this was really interesting. Every use from first, second, third, fourth, fifth, it has like a totally different story. Okay, it's not as consistent as some of the other words we went through, but it still has the same basic meaning. This idea of something that's very weighty, and this was a story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and this is when in fact you talked about this in your Torah portion, and it says that, shall I hide from Abraham the thing which I do? Yahweh said, and he said, saying, Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. We're going to come back to this verse in a little bit later. He says, for I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and that they shall keep the way of Yahweh to do justice and judgment, that Yahweh may bring upon Abraham that which he had spoken of him. And Yahweh said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, that word grievous is the Hebrew word kabod, the first time it's used in the Torah. So it's something that's very, very heavy. You know, we know that the sin of Sodom was just very heavy, especially on Lot and his family as they're dwelling in that city. The culture, it weighed heavily on them, right? Okay. So that's the first use. The second use was in the story of Shechem defiling Dinah. Again, another kind of a not-so-good story, right? And if you remember the story, Dinah decided, she was the daughter of Jacob, she decided she was going to go out from his father's house and just check out the land. She's just going to go out and check to see how the world was doing things. And what happened? You know, she fell into the culture of another people. And Shechem became intimate with her, and the brothers heard about it, the father heard about it, and the brothers were very, very angry. Because why? Because it brought shame to their people, shame to their family. And so Jacob, you know, said, you know, you need to calm down, okay? And so they went and they made this agreement that if Shechem would and all their men would become circumcised as Israel, then they would trade wives and this and that. But we know that the two brothers, sons of Jacob, were deceitful in that contract. And but anyway, so this is a story here, and it says in verse. I'm just going to drop down to verse 18. And so they made this agreement with them that if you'd become circumcised, and so the words pleased Hamor, which was Shechem's dad, and Shechem, which was Hamar's son. And the young man deferred not to do the thing because he had delight in Jacob's daughter, and he was more honorable than all the house of his father. So in this example, we see Shechem, even though in their culture he did something, in Israel's culture he did something that was forbidden, you know, was not good, but he did the right thing by be willing to take a Dinah to be his wife. And so he was more honorable than all the house of his father, okay? So he had, I don't know, you might say, so he carried a lot of weight, maybe in his family, because, you know, the way he conducted himself in their culture. So that's second use. Third use is in Genesis 48, and it's the story of Jacob's reunion with Joseph. And this is when Jacob came to Joseph, and Joseph presented his two sons to Jacob, and Jacob went to bless them. And he said in verse 8, and Israel beheld Joseph's sons and said, who are these? And Joseph said unto his father, these are my sons whom God hath given me in this place. And he said, bring them, I pray thee, unto me, and I will bless them. And the eyes of Israel were dim, were kabod. They were heavy for age, so that he could not see. And he brought them near unto him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said unto Joseph, I had not thought to see your face, and lo, God has showed me also thy seed. So this idea of kabod is used in the sense of Jacob's eyes dimming, you know, heavy, not being able to see. So we're seeing a variety of uses of this word kabod, are we not? Okay. Fourth use. And this was the story of the Israelites' burden of Egypt of the taskmasters. And I'll just drop down to verse 6. This is when Pharaoh commanded that Israel be given any straw to make bricks, okay? And they were to make bricks without straw. And and then verse 9, he says, let there more work be laid upon the men, kabod, that they may labor therein, and let them not regard vain words. So here their burdens were increased. And so this work, this burden, this weight was increased to their physical labor. And the fifth use of kabod is a story of God hardening Pharaoh's heart. In Exodus 8, verses 8 and 15, I just got the two verses there. And this is when Pharaoh called for Moses during one of the plagues and said, entreat Yahweh that he may take away the frogs from me and from my people, and I will let the people go, that they may do sacrifice unto Yahweh. And so Moses did. And then later on, what did Pharaoh do? Verse 15, but when Pharaoh saw that there was respite, he hardened, or he kabod his heart, and hearkened not unto them as Yahweh had said. So again, another different use of the word. But he hardened his heart. He made his heart like stone, okay, and would not listen. And this idea of kabod meaning heavy is illustrated, I think, best in the book of Lamentations. And it says, "For I am the man that hath seen affliction by the rod of his wrath. He hath hedged me about that I cannot get out. He hath made my chain heavy," or kabod. So this is the Hebrew root word behind the word honor, okay? So I have a thematic question for you. Before the question. So to capture the meaning of kabod in today's culture, you've probably heard the phrase, "he carries a lot of weight." Heard that phrase before? So it gives us, in our culture, that would be similar to this word kabod. And it implies that he has a lot of clout or a lot of power or a lot of influence, okay? So a thematic question, who in the Bible accepted their responsibility to carry a heavy burden in order to bring great honor to their father and mother? I heard, what did I hear? Yeshua. So you see a theme that's connected to this Hebrew word for honor, your father and your mother. We're going to see some concrete actions of what it really means to honor your mother and your father, to honor the God we serve. And this is probably one of the best examples we have. We're going to look at some others. So, what stories in the Bible provide, say, thematic connection and parallel to a model son or daughter who honored their father or mother and accepted the gravity or weight of their responsibility? So these are some. So beyond Yeshua, what are some stories in the Bible that you can think of? Joseph. Okay, that's all. Pardon? Abel. Okay. Who else? Esther. Ruth. I didn't put any women example. I should have done that. Ruth comes to mind. Pardon? Abigail. Okay. Isaac. David. Okay. So we're going to start with one model son whose name was, well, who was the God always referred, the God of the Bible? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay. So Abraham was a model son. The ones you mentioned were too, okay? I just didn't have as examples in here. So Abraham was a model son. And I'm going to try to go through this quick and so we can get through this. So in Genesis chapter 12, 1 through 5, it says, "Now Yahweh had said unto Abraham, Get you out of your country and from your kindred and from your father's house unto a land that I will show thee." Now I believe Abraham, well, we know he followed God's commandments, did he not? Did he not honor his father and his mother to the intent that the Torah specified? Absolutely. So he's not like leaving his father and his mother, okay? He was a very rich man. He may have had a lot of money set aside and servants to take care of his father and his mother if they were still living at this time. Okay. And he says, "And I will make of thee a great nation. I will bless thee and make thy name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless you, and curse him that curseth you. And in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed." So what is that a reference in prophecy to? In thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. What's that a reference to? Yeshua. In Abraham. Because remember, he said, "I will make thee a father of many nations, and all nations shall be blessed through you." That blessing that he was referring to was the one that would come through his loins, Yeshua. And also, just by keeping the commandments, statutes, and judgments, that was a blessing to his offspring, to his family, to his kids and his grandchildren, and the nations around him. That was a blessing to those around him also. But he said, "In you shall all the families of the earth be blessed." So Abraham departed. So Yahweh, he didn't just tell Abraham to leave with no purpose. So what was Yahweh's purpose with Abraham? Okay, to make of him a great nation, to give him a land, and that through him, through his seed, that this Messiah would come and be a blessing to all nations. So he took that responsibility with the greatest of weight, you might say. Okay, I'm trying to take this concept of the word honor and attach it to the gravity of the responsibility that Abraham took upon himself to carry out, to please his Father, his Father in heaven. And so Abraham departed as Yahweh had spoken, and Lot went with him, and Abraham was 75 years old when he departed. And Abraham took Sarah his wife, Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. Dropping down to verse 10. And there was a famine in the land, and Abraham went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous. And it came to pass, when he was come near to enter into Egypt, that he said unto Sarah his wife, Behold now, I know that you are a fair woman to look upon. Therefore it shall come to pass, when the Egyptians shall see thee, that they shall say, This is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will save you alive. So I pray you, Thou art my sister, that it may be. Say, I pray you, you are my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and for my soul, and my soul shall live because of thee. And it came to pass that when Abraham was coming to Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman, that she was very fair. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And he entreated Abraham well for her sake, and he had sheep and oxen and asses, men servants, maidservants, and camels. And Yahweh plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. And Pharaoh called Abraham and said, What is this that you have done? Why did you not tell me she was thy wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so I might have taken her to me to wife? Now therefore, behold your wife, take her and go thy way. And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away and his wife and all that he had. Question: did this ever puzzle you? Why was Abraham willing to give up his cherished wife and not fight for her like he did for his nephew Lot? Did he not have trained military servants? So why did he not fight for Sarah? He knew his purpose. Remember, what was the promise that God made to Abraham when he said, I want you to go leave your country, your kindred, and go to the land? What was the promise that he gave Abraham? The one I had underlined there, what was it, Greg? He said that in thee, in you, shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. That promised seed he knew had to come through him. The seed comes from the man. And he knew that if he died, that promise of all nations being blessed, of all people having a chance to eternal life, was gone. So he took that responsibility to the point where he was willing to give up his most cherished possession in order to fulfill this promise that Abraham gave him. Because if Sarah passed, the seed was still going to come through him, right? So he was willing to give up his most cherished possession in life because he honored his father in such a gravity that that's what he was willing to do. Are you seeing a theme here? Okay, this is just the first example of a model son. We gave the most important example earlier when I said, what person can you think of that took the responsibility and the burden to honor his father and his mother? You mentioned Yeshua. Okay, so this was an example of Abraham. Does that kind of help explain why he was willing to do that? Okay, and it didn't just stop with him. And you say, well, how do you know, Mike? Well, if you back up here in Genesis 12, that's where he gave the promise. And he left. Okay, that's 12. That's verses 1 through 5 In verse 10, he comes into the land, there was a famine, so he goes into Egypt. Okay? And then that's when he tells his wife Sarah, say, I pray thee, that you're my sister, which she was his sister, half-sister. Okay? So he wasn't quite totally lying. But he knew his purpose, and he was willing to carry that to the fullest extent. Does that make sense? Okay, well, it didn't just stop with him. Let's see, back up here. Okay, and we mentioned this already. Abraham knew that Yahweh took his responsibility seriously. And this is, we already read this earlier. But when Yahweh was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, he said, I got to let Abraham know. Why? Well, Abraham had a relative there, Lot. And, there's this saying, that story that Abraham possibly thought that this promised seed might come through his nephew Lot. It doesn't say that, but why was he willing to go defend or go fight for Lot? And because remember when Yahweh came to him and said, that you're going to have a child and you're going to have descent. He says, how? Through Eleazar? Remember he said that? So he had this idea that maybe it wouldn't come through him, but through one of his relatives, and yet still fulfill this idea that's coming through his family. Okay, did he think that Lot was possibly that avenue? Okay, and so he was concerned about Lot, and he wanted to make sure that Yahweh wasn't going to destroy Lot in Sodom, because he knew that promised seed was so critical for his descendants and the rest of the nations. Okay. So he says, for I know him that he will, it mentions there that all nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. Again, this promise of the seed, a Messiah coming through him. And I know him, he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall teach the way of Yahweh to do justice and judgment, that Yahweh may bring upon Abraham that which he had spoken of. And in Genesis 22 here, it came to pass that after these things that God did tempt Abraham. Okay, so this is a story of Isaac, the offering of Isaac. Why was Abraham so quick to, after almost 100 years, Yahweh gives him a son. Now Yahweh tells him to go and offer him as a sacrifice. Why was he so willing to do that?
He knew the story how it ends.
Yeah, he knew the story. He knew his purpose. And he was willing. He took the gravity, the weight of that responsibility, and he did not waver. He went. And he said in the last verse, he says, and Abraham said to the young man, abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. He knew that if Yahweh took him, that Yahweh would raise him up to life because of that promise that he made. He did not waver. Isaac was a model son. Well, Isaac had a very similar event happened to him that Abraham had with Sarah and his wife. Isaac had a very similar thing happen to him with him and Rebekah. And there was a famine in the land, and as it was in the days of Abraham, and Isaac went unto Abimelech, king of the Philistines, unto Gerar, and Yahweh appeared unto him and said, go not down into Egypt, but dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you, and I will bless thee, for unto thee and unto thy seed I will give these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham thy father. Did Isaac understand the promise to Abraham and how that promised seed was going to come through him? Did Isaac understand that? So he's continuing on that responsibility of that promise through Abraham's seed. He understood his responsibility and the weight of it. And he told him, I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and in thy seed shall all nations of the earth be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice, kept my charge, commandments, and statutes, and my laws. And then and dropping down. So he dwelt there, and the men in the place asked him of his wife, and he said, she is my sister. For he feared to say, she's my wife, lest, said they, the men of the place should kill me for Rebekah, because she was fair to look upon. And so you know the rest of the story. So again, I'll just ask it again. Why was Isaac willing to give up his cherished wife and not fight for her? As Tom would say, he knew the end. He knew his purpose. He knew his function. He knew that weight of that promise was on him, and he was willing to give up his most cherished thing in his life. Okay, Joseph was a model son. We mentioned this, and I'm just going to kind of paraphrase here, but you remember Joseph. He was Jacob's favorite son. He was given a coat of many colors. His sons, his brothers, despised him because Jacob favored Joseph over the others. And it also sounds like Joseph was one who would tattle or tell on the wayward ways of his brothers to his father. It tells that in the story. So he became kind of a hated person within his own family. And he had dreams that Yahweh gave him, and his brothers didn't like the dreams. His dad rebuked him for the dreams, but his dad sat back and knew that there was a purpose, and there was a vision that Joseph was given that he didn't quite understand yet. Okay, so what does his father Jacob do? So he tells Joseph, he was 17 years old. He was a young, what happened to Greg? We lost Greg. So Jacob was 17 years old. He was feeding the flock. So he's a teenager, he was a youth, and he was feeding the flock with his brethren. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah and his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. So this is where he was kind of telling on them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. And then that goes in and tells a story about his dreams. And they hated him even more for the dreams. And then, let's see, and he told his father the dreams. His father rebuked him, and his brothers envied him, but his father observed the saying. And then in verse 12, it says, his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said unto Joseph, do thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send you unto them. And he said, here am I will go. So why would Joseph, being hated of his brothers, this was a long journey. It wasn't just like they were around the block feeding their sheep. These were days, if weeks, if not months of travel to go find. And traveling alone was pretty dangerous in that time. But why was Joseph so willing to go? Because he honored his father. He knew he had a purpose. He knew that the responsibility that was put on him through the dreams, that Yahweh was going to be with him. And so he said, here am I will go. So we know the story that he went, and his brothers saw him. They conspired against him and sold him down into Egypt, right? And so he was brought down to Egypt, and Yahweh was with Joseph in verse 2. He was a prosperous man. He was in the house of his master, the Egyptian, and his master saw that Yahweh was with him, and Yahweh made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he made him overseer over all his house and all that he had put into his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that Yahweh blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of Yahweh was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand. And Joseph was a goodly person, well favored. I'm kind of skipping a few verses here. And his master's wife cast eyes upon Joseph. And Joseph kept refusing her invitations. And he says in verse 8, he says, behold, my master wanteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I. Neither hath he kept me back anything from me but you, because you art his wife. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass that she kept she kept giving invites, and he kept trying to stay away from her, and he never hearkened to her. Okay, why? Why did Joseph have this self-control that we're instructed to have? Because he knew of his purpose, and he knew of the gravity of that responsibility, and to waver to either side could jeopardize that responsibility and that mission that he was given. And so now we go to David, who was a model son. Let me back up just a minute. So, I've mentioned this before in times past. What would it take, for this culture of young men being able to respect young women? What would it take for that culture to change and align with the biblical view? Men like Joseph. This isn't, we often think, well, it's a girl problem. It's not. It's a man's problem. It's a man's responsibility. If every man would be a Joseph, we wouldn't have the cultural decline, in the area of teen pregnancies and abortions and all these other things, would we? It's the man. Who was responsible for Eve in the garden? It was the man, and he failed. Okay, so I just want to put that in. So David was a model son. Somebody mentioned David as one a good example. Now he had his shortcomings, did he not? Okay, but Yahweh labeled him as a man after his own heart. And you're going to see that in the story of David in just the simple task of being a shepherd, of taking the responsibility of watching his father's sheep. Now you notice that Joseph and his brethren were keepers of sheep. Okay, there's a story connected, a theme connected to the story of shepherds and watching over the flock. So David was a son of the Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons, and the man went among men for an old man in the days of Saul. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle. And the names of the 3 sons that went to battle were Eliab the firstborn, and next to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. So again, David has this, it seemed like a seemingly menial task of watching over the sheep, right? But we're going to see that Dave took this responsibility very heavily, you might say. And of course, this was in the days when Goliath was taunting Israel to send out a man to fight, and whoever would win, the other nation would have to serve the winning nation. And the Philistine drew near morning and evening and presented himself 40 days. And Jesse said unto David his son, Take now for thy brethren an ephah of parched corn and these 10 loaves, and run into the camp of your brethren, and carry these 10 cheeses and the captain of their thousands, and look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. So David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with a keeper. So he didn't leave off his responsibility of watching the sheep. He assigned somebody to take care of him, right? Okay, and so he went as Jesse commanded him, and he came to the trench as the host was going forth to fight, and shouted for the battle. And jumping down to verse 26, And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that kills this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him after this manner, saying, So shall it be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he had spoke unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, Why did you come down here? With whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? Didn't you have a responsibility back there, and you just left them? And he says, and I know your pride and the naughtiness of your heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. He wanted to be part of the, he wanted to be part of the, the thing that was going on. He didn't want to be left out. All right. Actually, there was another verse there you couldn't see, so I'm going to have to read that. And David said, "What have I done now? Is there not a cause?" And he turned from him toward another and spake after the same manner. And the people answered him again after the former manner. And when the words were heard which David spoke, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him, for your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "But you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you're just but a youth." Where's Greg? Did we lose Greg? We lost Greg. Jada. And he being a man of, for you're but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And verse 34, and David said unto Saul, "Your servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And then, when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. And your servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God." And David said, "Moreover, Yahweh hath delivered me out of the paw of the lion, out of the paw of the bear. He will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine." And Saul said unto David, "Go, and Yahweh be with thee." So I have a question. If David just had this menial task of watching his father's sheep, what inclined him, what was in him that would go out after? What's one lamb? A bear comes up and takes a lamb, or a lion. Why was David willing to go and face that bear and that lion to save that lamb's life? It was just a sheep. You seeing a theme here? He did it because he honored his father. To him, it would bring shame if he had let one of those sheep be lost. So you see the gravity of the meaning of honor. It means more than just, yes, we obey our parents, but do we take it to the level where we will fight, we will put ourselves in harm's way in order to protect our mother and father from shame, to protect their honor? That's why I believe David was labeled a man after Yahweh's own heart, because he was willing for a menial task to go and pull the lamb out of the mouth of a lion and a bear, risking his own life, because he didn't want to disappoint his father, his physical father. We've lost the concept of honor, the biblical concept of honor. Yeshua, we're coming to a close. Yeshua was a model son. And so the themes that we saw with Joseph and with Abraham and Isaac and David, willing to give up their most prized possession, willing to give up, face the lion and bear, to face Goliath, was to protect the honor of his father. And so with Yeshua, it says here in Matthew 3, verse 16 and 17, Yeshua, when he was baptized, he went up straightway out of the water, and lo, the heavens were opened unto him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and lighting upon him. And lo, a voice from heaven saying, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." So what was it with Yeshua that made his father so pleased with him? Because he took the responsibility that was given him with all the weight, you might say, of this world on his own shoulders, and he was committed to following through with that responsibility, so not to bring his father to shame, but to honor his father. The thematic connections to caring for the flock like David did in order to honor his father, we see it in with Yeshua in his words. He said, "Take heed that you despise not one of these little ones." So that when we look at the sheep that David was watching over, in Yahweh's eyes, they were defenseless. They were little. They needed a shepherd. They needed protection. And so it is with our young children today. They need a shepherd. They need somebody to protect them, to keep them from going off into the way of the world, the way of the culture around us. And he says, "For I say unto you that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven. For the Son of Man has come to save that which was lost. So how think you, if a man have 100 sheep and one of them be gone astray, doth he not leave the 99 and go to the mountains and seek that which is gone astray?" That's exactly what David did. "And if so be that he findeth it, verily I say unto you, he rejoiceth more than that sheep than of the 99 which went not astray. Even so, it is not the will of your Father which is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish." And in John chapter 10, he says, "For I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for his sheep. But he that is a hireling and not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, when he sees the wolf coming, he will leave the sheep and flee. And the wolf catcheth them and scatters the sheep. For the hireling fleeth because he is a hireling and careth not for his sheep." So this is a stark contrast of one who is willing to honor his father and one who is not. For he that is hireling, he doesn't care for the sheep. He'd rather save his life and let the sheep go and be taken away. So a stark contrast. "But I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and I am known of mine. As the Father knoweth me, even so I, the Father, I lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep I have which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. Therefore doth my Father love me, because I lay down my life, that I might take it again. And no man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have the power to lay it down. I have the power to take it again. This commandment I've received of my Father." How much time do I have? What time is it? It's 10 after 1? Okay. So I'm going to stop there, and I wanted to touch on the second aspect of this commandment, the thematic connection to promise. And I'll just leave you with these words. This idea that this promise that was given in the commandment, in fact, this is the only commandment with promise. Hello, Greg. How you doing? How was the nap? Okay. But this promise that your days will be prolonged is thematically connected every time that Yahweh talks about keeping his commandments. The concept of the blessing that your days may be long or prolonged, that it may go well with you, is connected to walking in his ways, to keep his statutes and his commandments and his judgments. And so, I've been asked, what if your father or mother tells you to go do something that is, according to Torah, unlawful? Well, this command isn't telling you to obey them for that reason. When we, as children, as youth, if we keep his commandments, statutes, and judgments, that's going to bring honor to your mother and your father. That's going to bring honor to those around you, your brothers and your sisters in your community. And so the blessing of the promise of honoring your mother and father begins with walking in God's ways. and that will bless your mother and your father. So that's the thematic connection to the promise. It just isn't tied to, if I obey my mom and dad, my days will be long, okay. It is part of it, but it involves doing all his commandments, statutes, and judgments. Because that is what will bring life. That is what will bring victory. That's what will bring redemption.